Fly fishermen in Norway have been using local wet fly designs for a very long time. A few designs have even been recognised beyond Norway, the Hegeli and Telemarkskongen, for example. The Femund River is a classic fly fishing river, rising in Lake Isteren. The upper reaches offer excellent grayling and trout fishing, attracting visitors from all over Europe. But it's not just the fly fishing that draws visitors year after year. The scenery, surroundings and wildlife are well worth a visit for those who enjoy fells and forest. Johan has fished this river for many years and is keen to find grayling with a traditional wet fly on the leader. But the right type of fly isn't all you need to catch a big grayling. It's important to know how to present the fly so that it behaves in a natural way.
Wet fly fishing, maybe the most classic, one of the most traditional ways of fly fishing. To become a good wet fly fisherman, there are a couple of techniques that we need to master. And among those, the upstream free drift presentation probably is the most common, at least the most classical way. That's the same technique that we saw Paul Procter and Malcolm Greenhalgh practice when we were in England. It's very hard to feel when the fish take a free drift fly. Well, of course, if we have a very hungry and upset fish that pulls out the fly rod out of our hand, well, then of course, but 99 times of 100 we see the strike. And that happens when the leader butt or the fly line tip stops or start to sink. To do this, we need to have a very high floating leader butt that we can grease with either fly line or fly gel of some sort. Anything will do. Another very clever idea is to use a piece of fly line like Paul Procter did. He used either an orange or a fluorescent yellow color that is highly visible on top of the surface. He has marked every 5th centimeter with a marking pen with black marks like this, and that makes it even easier to discover. The free drift presentation is a quite easy technique to understand, but there are a couple of things to think of.
Begin using the upstream method by casting the flies a few meters diagonally upstream from the suspected lie. As the flies land, the tip of the rod should be just above the surface of the water. At the start of the drift, make an upstream mend to form a short curve furthest out in the line. At the same time as the flies drift with the current, always keep the line stretched as far as the curve. A take is indicated when the bend furthest out on the fly line suddenly tautens or stops. To make it easier to see when a fish has taken a fly, it's a good idea to use a line that's clearly visible on the surface. Just upstream, Johan is following the main current close to the riverbank. A concentrated current, together with a deep edge, always makes a good place to fish. To let the flies break through the faster surface current more easily, Johan has attached a small sinker just in front of the first fly. Every possible lie is fished with repeated drifts.
Väldigt fin fisk.
Success at last. The grayling feels heavy, and it's using the current to its advantage in the struggle with the rod. It's a really fine grayling, caught on the middle fly, a partridge and orange. During the early morning, grayling fishing in the river can be really excellent. So we stay where we are to see if any more grayling will be interested in the orange spider.
Tack, tack.
After lunch, it's time to try another stretch of the river, further downstream. But first, Johan takes out his insect net to find out which insects are active in the river just now. The net's pushed down to the bottom, about half a metre downstream of his feet. Then Johan kicks and pulls amongst the stones so that the nymphs will come loose and float on the current into the net. During the summer, the river's seething with life, and there's plenty for the fish to eat. In the net we find several sorts of mayflies, as well as case caddis and free-living caddis larvae.
The other technique that the wet fly fisherman has to master is the downstream method. The presentation starts from the fisherman's position and downstream. And compared to the upstream free drift presentation, we now present the fly towards the stream. So it's actually not about a free drift presentation here at all. It seems a little bit unnatural that a little nymph or a pupa would swim towards the current, particularly this bit under the surface. But it actually happens while it's emerging time, when they're coming up towards the surface to emerge to a hatch. And I think of a special time in the late evenings when the sedges are hatching. Another difference between the upstream free drift presentation and the downstream presentation is that we, in this technique, have two ways to discover the strike. One is to see the fly line stop on the surface on its way downstream. And the other is when the fish takes and we actually can feel the pull in the fly line, and that is a very nice way to discover a bite. Some fly fishermen mean that this is a beginner's technique, and I wouldn't agree with that for a moment, because this is a fantastic technique that I have caught some of my very best fish with during the years.
Cast the flies out at an angle of 45 degrees, diagonally downstream. Mend the line so that the outermost part of the line is positioned directly upstream of the leader and flies. Then the flies can slowly drift in to your own side, helped by the pressure of the current. At the same time as the flies move, it's important to keep up and ensure that the tip of the rod is always pointing at the flies. The risk otherwise is that you won't feel when the fish takes. Every fishing spot is covered by several casts, and for each new drift the flies are cast a few metres further out. In this way you cover the streams methodically, yet with every drift you fish the flies in new, untested waters. In the middle of the river the current is fierce and difficult to fish, but the waters slow down somewhat along the edges. The quieter waters and the large blocks of stone make these edges especially interesting to fish. To slow down the movement of the flies into the edge, Johan mends the line several times during each drift.
Tack, tack.
In the fells, the weather changes quickly, and the fine afternoon soon turns to heavy rain. The fishing gets poorer, so we decide to make a new attempt this evening.
Now at the dusk, maybe one of the most interesting periods of the day starts, when the sedge females are coming up, laying their eggs all over the stream, and the emerging sedge pupas rising towards the surface. When that occurs, can be thousands of them out there, and the fish are going mad. And when that happens, I really want to be out there. Of course, it can be hard to see the strike because of the dusk, because of the darkness. But because of that, I use the downstream presentation when I feel the strike instead, like a pull in the fly line. I fish with a team of flies, as usual. 3 flies. I use the Swedish super pupa, like an end fly, size 12, yellow and black. Lovely fly for this type of fishing. And I have a little black peacock and spider in the middle, which normally can attract those tricky fish that won't take the super pupa. And at the top, I have a big, brushy, grey March brown. So let's go out and see if any of those flies can attract one of the big graylings out there. Hopefully they will. Another thing, when fishing at the dusk, be careful, because those big rocks out there can be really, really hard to walk between.
Under cover of darkness, and with an increasing supply of drifting caddis pupae, the grayling become very active during the evening and night. Even though there aren't any signs of feeding, you can expect the grayling to be at their feeding stations to take advantage of the hatching caddis pupae. Food is gathered at the edge of the currents like a long smorgasbord, and it's easy for the grayling to get to. Johan fishes the currents systematically and lets the flies drift in front of every imaginable lie. At spots which seem more interesting, the line is mended so that the flies pause, giving the fish a little more time to make a decision. When the grayling takes, Johan makes a quick strike by pulling in the line with his left hand before lifting the rod. This keeps the flies in the same position, just in case the fish isn't properly hooked.
Oj, oj, oj.
we have an interesting and exciting evening of fishing with drifting caddis pupae. A lot of the grayling are excellent, and what could be better than to end this trip to Norway with a successful evening's fishing, providing happy memories for company during the darkness of winter.